Leah, Malcolm's teenage daughter in the recent miniseries of Malcolm in the Middle, Life Still Unfair, was a fascinating character to learn about, partially because of how her plots allowed us a glimpse into what a modern Malcolm in the Middle would truly look like, but mostly because going in, I was very curious about how much of her father's personality would be present in her, because overall, it could tell us a little bit more about Malcolm. And it seems Leah has caused a bit of a divide in the community. Some love her and others really don't care for her, which isn't quite surprising because Malcolm himself is a very divisive character, which I think comes down to the fact that he's both relatable and a bit of a prick. As the audience, it's hard not to feel for Malcolm at times or understand some of his frustrations. He's an intelligent fellow who feels he has trouble being understood, and his unusual upbringing and wacky family often doesn't do him any favors. If anything, they lean on him too much, which they admit, and that does give him a bit of a reason to have that ego. But, on the other hand, it is hard to understand his seeming unwillingness to budge on how he interacts with the world. He could soften his approach and maybe even change minds, but he always comes at it all high and mighty. Furthermore, he seems to be unable to see that stupid people can have utility because there's more to life than intelligence, which is a lesson most well said by the film A Man Named Otto.
You think your life is so hard because everybody's an idiot and you have to do everything on your own, right? Right? But guess what? You can't. No one can. And I think you should just be happy that someone was trying to help you get through a crappy day. Even if they're an idiot.
But by looking at Leah, we could maybe learn more about Malcolm's personality and how much of it is nature versus nurture. And I think that is even more true because Leah was separated from her extended family, which were the primary stressors of Malcolm's childhood. Malcolm growing up in a very chaotic environment where everybody wasn't exactly always putting their best foot forward could really play a role into why Malcolm became the person he was. And so since Leah was removed from all that, it's interesting to analyze that. Now, there is one thing I'll note, though, that does seem wholly absent from Leah, and that is her mother's influence. Which that's mostly explained by the fact that Leah's mom, whose name was like Unicorn or some shit.
Her mother, Dreamer? Yes, her name is Dreamer. Ran off 3 days after giving birth, so single father.
Ran out on the family very quickly after Leah was born, so obviously she didn't have much input on raising her or anything like that. But goddamn, them Malcolm genes are strong, huh? She looks like him, thinks like him, sounds like him, and she isn't even his real daughter, of course, so shout out casting on this one. You know, some people were concerned that Keely Carson would be too old for the role, but considering Malcolm got a girl pregnant like right away in college, it made perfect sense, and Keely Carson and Frankie Muniz had fantastic chemistry, and I just thought she did a very good job in the role. Now, before we get into just talking a little bit more about Leah and her personality and what she did in the show, I want to say thank you guys for all the support on the channel recently. Please like and subscribe, it always helps out a small channel like this. And this is the first episode of Offscript. I hope to do, maybe shorter videos, but I guess not always, but just slightly lesser edited videos and unscripted videos, so that way I can talk about more things, because I just have so much on my list, and not everything I can take the time out to script a video on, especially because this isn't my full-time job. But let's go ahead and get back to it. So what we see is Leah is basically the spitting image of her father. She's quick-witted and fast on her feet, but at the same time, she doesn't necessarily seem to be as socially well-versed as her father. Malcolm wasn't exactly the most popular kid. Well, I guess he was the most popular kid in his class, the Krellboyns. But Malcolm at time had his awkwardness, but for the most part, he was pretty decent at engaging. It was just that he was an asshole in the process. One of the biggest differences is Leah is much more soft, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that she is more open and friendly, and not so quick to just be an asshole, although she sometimes wants to or has the thoughts, and sometimes I think she should, and she lets things slide when she shouldn't. For example, there is this bully that that she could have absolutely ragged on, but instead she takes the high road, which this bully's been fucking with her for a while, so I don't see how that's going to help. But so essentially, while Leah can think like her dad in the logical sense, she seemingly doesn't have that same kind of application of the knowledge that her father would utilize. And I think that particular trait comes down to the fact that Leah grew up in a much chiller and calmer environment. She lives with just Malcolm, and for the most part, Malcolm seems to try to not give her such a chaotic or aggressive life where she constantly has to be on the back foot and looking out for what might happen. She didn't have any siblings to have to kind of fight back against. And in some ways, I think that really helps her, because when she gets out of high school, she will be able to connect with people and be able to socialize and hopefully get away from those mean girl type crowds, although they do always exist throughout life, but you can avoid them for the most part after high school. Another interesting thing though about Leah's thought processes is that we get to see them. For example, in the original series, Malcolm would always have these fourth wall breaks and asides with the audience, but that's not something we really get with other characters. However, when it comes to Leah, that is something that we get to see, and we get to see it pretty much from the first scene that we see her. And it allowed for some really interesting moments, having these kind of dichotomies between the thoughts of the father and of the daughter, which I know we aren't really going to be getting any more Malcolm, or at the very least, if we do, it's just going to be like specials every now and again. But I do think that this dynamic would be really awesome to see in a full season sitcom, especially because it feels like it kind of passes the torch a little bit, you know, passing the audience from Malcolm to Leah, and could really be a pathway to a series that uses Frankie Muniz a little bit less and focuses more around Keely Karsten. Although I know that's wishful thinking. I mean, although maybe Disney has enough money to make that happen, but I doubt it. Another part of Leah that is very admirable though is that she's much more open to forgiveness than Malcolm is. And she also seems to have a desire to make peace with her family and seems to really want that family, where Malcolm is more quick to just reject them and try to run away, which I think this partially stems from her irregular situation with being raised by a single dad. You know, of course your mother running away when you're really young would probably push you to being more of someone who wants a family. And then it also partially probably stems from her softer nature. And again, I do not mean soft negatively. For the most part, she is not a pushover. You know, there are elements where I felt she should have stood up and fought back, but even so, I can see why she might turn her other cheek in that specific situation. But while that specific situation is a spot where she didn't really fight back, there are plenty of other places where she doesn't only fight back, she plans and schemes to get her family picture to become whole again. We really see this when she works with Tristan in order to dupe Malcolm to get him into the car and to go to the family reunion. And furthermore, she may be a little lonely, but she's not desperate like Malcolm was at times, and she wasn't willing to put up with being used just to have a boyfriend, which is a spot that we really see her stand up for herself. If you don't know, I'm talking about the storyline we see between Leah and a boy from her school named Jacob. Carl, I don't know. I genuinely don't remember, but that's what that kid deserves, okay? Not the actor. I'm sure the actor's, I don't know. He's probably fine. Essentially, though, this was the storyline that I mentioned at the top of the video that shows us what a full series order of Malcolm in the Middle might look like in the modern day. We see that Leah makes a friend at school who she may have a bit of a crush on. We get to see that relationship develop a little bit as they flirt slyly over a video call, for example. And the series does a good job of roping in real ways that technology affects the dating lives of young people and puts it in a traditional sitcom situation or format. I remember being on Skype. Yes, I'm old, okay? With the girl that I was into back in high school and shit. But overall, I felt that they showed it in such a genuine way, and that was really surprising. You even have this scene of tossing the phone away, trying to hide the smile so your parent doesn't try to butt into your life, which, by the way, little side tangent, if you're a parent, make your kid comfortable enough to not have to hide FaceTiming a boy or girl at school from you. Obviously, don't let them do anything, moderate it, but don't embarrass them, make them comfortable, and then if something truly goes wrong, they should feel feel like they can come to you, which I think most parents want that. They want their kid to come to them in times of trouble, and they wonder why, and it's like, hey man, because you never gave them an open door that made it comfortable to do so. But I digress. Unfortunately, this puppy love relationship, though, comes crashing and burning down in an all too familiar way. Within this scene, the second I saw the "what are you wearing" text, I knew it was Jover, dude. But part of me was like, nah, there's no way. Because the gall, the absolute gumption to send those texts while she is at a family reunion is fucking insane. That kid is giving Kanye and Conor McGregor a run for their money in the ego realm of the world, which is insane because he does not have Kanye or Conor money. But thankfully, he did show his hand early on, so that way Leah didn't waste any more time on him. And as mentioned earlier, she stands up for herself here. She calls him a creep and sends the text to, I think it was like the school principal or his mother or both, which I really appreciate that the show didn't just brush it off as a guy being a guy. She felt wronged and she went to the proper parties. And if you were a kid watching this, you really should not be. I mean, my channel is called Smokin' Sessions, for God's sakes. But if so, be like Leah. Stand up to creeps when they come your way. So overall, Leah was so fun to see added to the series. Her unfortunate and short relationship really gave us a glimpse into what a full show with Leah could do in the modern day, and I really quite liked that. She is truly the spitting image of her father, but her calmer and more peaceful upbringing affected her in such a clear way that has its downside, but mostly I think adds up to Leah being better than her father. She's calmer, more empathetic, and overall seems to be very good at mediating conflict, even when she wasn't exposed to a ton of conflict herself, besides of course her mother leaving so young. And I'm sure Malcolm, if he were real, would agree that Leah is better than him. At the end of the day, if you are a good parent, you put your best self on display, so that way those parts are distilled into your child, slowly eliminating the toxic parts if you do it right. And I say this loudly for the people in the back. All the parents who put their worst traits on display for their kids and then shame them for not knowing how to engage with the world when you never even showed them how to accept love. Put on your best face to move the world forward. Sure, we'll never be perfect, but we can definitely try to be a little better than those that came before us. And I think Leah is a great example of that. As always, this went significantly longer than I expected, so I'm sorry if there's a lot of rambling here. I hope you guys enjoyed. Like I said, I plan on doing more like these, hopefully shorter videos than this, you know, but I want to try to get more of these out so that way I can really talk about all of the ideas that I have, because there's just too much on the list. But as always, if you enjoyed, like and subscribe for more content like this in the future. My name is Crazy Rocky, and this has been a Smokin' Session.